Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra. Today let's look at those flooding striking so hard in British Columbia as well as Washington State or the Pacific Northwest. How it follows on the heels of their summer of extreme heat and wildfire, and is accompanied by mudslides. Then let's look at the burning of fossil fuels, the media, and the very underreported pipeline protests occurring in British Columbia, where Native American protesters have been recently arrested. Well, the climate mechanisms are fairly straightforward, and anyone in the media could be presenting them to you if they so wished. And I've cited to you from NASA, NOAA, Natural Resource Defense Council, Environmental Defense Fund, Union of Concerned Scientists, as well as Scientific American in the past. Well, basically, the Earth's temperature overall is rising due to the excessive burning of fossil fuels or the addition of greenhouse gases. That increase in heat means the atmosphere can now retain more moisture. It means the oceans will now give up more moisture. And that increased ability to retain means that, well, when it rains, it pours, or it doesn't rain for a very long time. So that hot summer helped produce these wildfires that rage through that region, weakening the soil. And then when the heavy rains come down, well, mudslides occur because the soil is now compromised. But also let's look at politics, the politics of pipelines. New large-scale pipeline construction is typically opposed by a coalition of environmentalists and native tribal activists. Because the pipelines pose a threat to groundwater and soil through leaks, represent a doubling down of a commitment to fossil fuels at a time when we should be scaling back, and threaten tribal sovereignty. Well, in British Columbia, underreported in the media, is a tribe called the Wet'suwet'en, who've been opposing the construction of a major gas pipeline, attempting to physically block that construction. Well, access for those construction workers has been enforced against the Wet'suwet'en by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And according to the Toronto Star, those arrests of protesters have been fairly brutal, involving an overwhelming and militarized-looking police presence, complete with guns and canines. Well, politically, we have Trudeau, who's of the Liberal Party, I believe, then contrasted with the Conservative parties. And then in the United States, our pipeline politics, we have the Republicans versus Democrats. Now here we could look at that situation and say, well, these pipelines are going through no matter who's in office. Well, there's some truth in that, but in the case of the United States, once Biden came in, he did stop one of those pipelines being protested by Native Americans within the United States, while Liberal Trudeau continues that pipeline project. But in Canada, they have something called the New Democratic Party, who is perhaps strongest on the environment, at least that's my impression. And in Canada, the Conservative Party would be weakest on the environment and most supportive of those fossil fuel interests. Similar to how in the United States, it's the Republican Party that has been most supportive of fossil fuel interests. Now let's look again at those Native Americans, or First Nations as they're called in Canada, standing up to those pipelines and being arrested. The fact that these pipelines are supported by major banking institutions, and that the real climate effects are underreported by our media, as are these native protests. Well, all that tells you that in a sense the Indian wars are still continuing, only not presented as such. And that the regime, if you want to call it that, of oil and gas is not only facilitated by a media that's not paying attention, a public where critical amounts are still too unaware and not demanding alternatives, but also by force. Well, I hope you found this analysis interesting and helpful, and if you did, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel, you've clicked that notification bell, you're commenting, liking, and until next time, as always, peace be with you.